This presentation will offer an overview of Chaucer's literary and political career and introduce important contextual aspects of his signature work, the Canterbury Tales. It is important to be aware that for an individual of the late 14th century, Chaucer's life was extraordinarily well documented. Beyond his work as a poet, his service to the court and crown of King Edward III has left an impressive record of his life and work history. Having ruled for 50 years, from 1327 until 1377, Edward's reign constitutes a sort of late medieval golden age, with Chaucer's literary achievements standing as one of its greatest hallmarks. Beyond his achievements as a writer, Chaucer was a government official and a member of Parliament. Two of Edward III's 5 surviving sons, Lionel of Antwerp and John of Gaunt, served as literary patrons to the poet. Writing his Middle English verses in the London dialect, Chaucer's English looks somewhat different from, and is likely more readable to modern students than the more remote Northwest Midlands dialect used by the Gawain poet. Best known for his Canterbury Tales, Chaucer also translated the Consolation. Beyond Boethius, whose Consolation articulates the philosophical positions of the declining Roman world, Chaucer was heavily influenced by the world of the Italian humanists. Born in 1265, Dante Alighieri's life overlapped with both Francesco Petrarca and Giovanni Boccaccio, whose works reflected the next generation's regard for the poet of the Divine Comedy. Petrarch and Boccaccio's works likewise influenced Chaucer heavily, and there is some speculation that a young Chaucer encountered one or both of these poets on a diplomatic journey to Italy early in his political career. This prospect is only tantalizing speculation, but it is important to see how the works of all 3 of these Italian poets would shape the poetry of the younger English poet. In general, each sought to remake the literary motifs of the ancient world into a tradition of art and literature that cultivated civic virtues and encouraged engagement in public life for the greater good. The occasions for Chaucer's Canterbury Tales are multiple. The concept of the pilgrimage itself connotes restoration and spiritual renewal, in conjunction with the themes of rebirth associated with the coming spring. The host of the pilgrimage, Harry Bailey, was a fictional London tavern keeper, possibly modeled on an actual one, who owned the Tabard Inn in South London, where the pilgrims gathered. After the customs of the day, he is credited with organizing the roughly 60-mile journey from London to Canterbury, proposing a storytelling competition to keep the pilgrims entertained along their journey. Canterbury was a common destination for middle-class Londoners, who would pay tribute there to the murdered St. Thomas à Becket. On the occasion depicted in Chaucer's poem, a likely date has been identified as 1392, and of the 30 pilgrims listed, 24 tales are told by 24 tellers, a varied and diverse cross-section of medieval English society featuring workers, business owners, entrepreneurs, knights and squires, and clerics. The first 18 lines, commonly memorized piece, represents the prologue to the prologue, explaining the occasion in conjunction with the advent of spring. The general prologue then introduces each teller according to the rather opaque vantage of the pilgrim Chaucer, a character based on the author himself and distinctive in its focus of selective details about each pilgrim. Chaucer portrays himself as a rather slow and dim-witted participant, but his brief summary of each pilgrim is intended to be evocative, especially as the pilgrim is then aligned with the story that he or she tells. Collectively, the tales were transcribed originally in a pair of manuscripts called the Hengwrt and the Ellesmere. Though differing somewhat in their order and transcription, these were set to print by William Caxton in the later 15th century and reflect a variety of distinctive story types common to medieval storytelling, including the sermon, the miracle, the fablio, the exemplum or moral fable, the Breton lay, and the beast fable. These are a few common medieval story forms. The Knight's Tale, the courtly romance that begins the proceedings, serves to order what follows, as it is parodied by the lowbrow tales told by the miller and the reeve. Two latecomers, the canon and the canon's yeoman, arrive just as the pilgrims reach Canterbury, and the canon yeoman's tale serves an important purpose as the pilgrims are just on the brink of reaching their destination, and the implied salvation that this connotes. The final tale, the parson's tale, is basically a sermon. It is very reflective and somewhat dull, and critics have spent much time considering its placement at the end of the narrative. Again, one point of entry into Chaucer's work is to consider the relationship between the pilgrim, as reflected in the general prologue, and the story that that pilgrim tells. I hope you enjoy the few tales I've selected for your reading here, and I hope that you see the rich personalities of the characters and of Chaucer himself. Thanks for listening.